The Deercast is brought to you by Divana Hunting, Tom's Targets, Style, Game Larder by Tarrant Refrigeration, Harkeela and Fox Bullets.
So hello everyone and welcome to episode 41 of the Deercast. We have a very special guest with us today and focusing on something a little bit different about the deer stalking and deer world, because we have Jack Millington joining us, who is the founder of Billy Tannery. And I think I think Jack has got a really exciting story to tell us in that actually he has been turning deer hides into leather. So welcome to the podcast, Jack.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And you nearly called me Billy, which is, I would say, a daily occurrence. So don't worry about it.
I'm glad it's not just me. I felt myself doing it, and I was sort of trying to stop myself at the same time. But thank you for being so gracious about it.
Well, no problem. Yeah, as I say, it's an obvious one that happens a lot. But yeah, the name Billy actually comes from goats rather than from my name. So that's how the business got started. And yeah, I can go into it in a lot more detail. But essentially, it's a business that the idea came from the farm that I grew up on in the Midlands, which started off as a dairy farm, but then later in its life, my dad started farming goats and ended up with quite a large herd of goats, and that was the sort of strange spark that got me into the leather world that more recently has got me involved in the world of deer.
I have so many questions, and so what I appreciate on the goat side, but how sort of goat leather to start with? Was it a sort of similar case to us as deer stalkers in terms of the hides are a sort of surplus product, or was there something else about the skin that sort of just intrigued you?
Well, it was exactly that. It was a surplus, a sort of a byproduct of the goat business that my dad had started as a bit of a side project. Really, I think his business, most of the goats in the UK are farmed for dairy, but dad had decided he wanted to have a goat meat business, so that was a slightly different thing. And I'd been working in marketing at the time. I was working down in London and was looking for something that would be a bit more hands-on and practical, but didn't want to join dad on the farm. So I was looking into different ways in which I could get involved, and that started off trying to help him sell some goat meat, and it sort of quickly turned into what are the other things we could do around this. And I just had a brainwave one day and thought maybe we could turn the goat skins left over from that into leather, and started calling around tried to start calling around what I assume would be lots of local tanneries that would just say, yeah, of course, please send us the goat skins and you can have some leather back. And very quickly realized that was not the case. And not only were there not many tanneries left, there definitely weren't any that were willing to do small skins like goats, which it turns out are a different sort of process and different machinery required to the sort of large hides that the remaining tanneries were kind of focusing on in the UK, the hides being traditionally from cows or larger animals. And yeah, I don't know, something in my personality was like someone saying, no, you can't do that. I was like, well, maybe I can work out a way to make it happen. So yeah, it started off as a bit of a side project to do alongside a job that was starting to bore me, and spiraled over a couple of years into, there is a way we might be able to do this by building a small version of a tannery on the farm, and going from there. And that's sort of what kicked it all off.
You didn't start like me by trying to literally tan skins in your garage and then try and like pin them up against a wall to like stretch them back out again. You were sensible where you went straight to actually building a proper sort of facility to do it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that probably would have put me off right at the start, to be honest. I think I was not that keen on doing it in that kind of way, and that was part of the challenge, was how would you do it sort of in a slightly more professional way. But yeah, I was lucky in that I was introduced to someone at Northampton University, which at the time had one of the leading kind of leather schools in Europe, really. And some of the staff members there were very encouraging and thought, well, okay, well, this one, if you're serious about doing this, then you need to talk to these people about getting some equipment. And yeah, I think I was just at the stage in my life, I was sort of in my early 20s, and decided that I would just jump two-footed into it and bought a load of machinery and, started going from there, which, might have been slightly foolhardy, but, it's sometimes good to jump into these things.
And what is it about goat leather that really attracted you to doing that as a business? Because I interact with leather as most people do, and I don't often see goat leather as being something that people advertise.
Yeah, and that's was sort of part of what interested me, and was that I'm actually doing some research is that globally there are lots of different types of leather that are used, as you imagine, but most people assume that all leather is from cows and it's all the same, and it's the leather that you would see on a belt, or that's maybe as far as people think. And actually, I've discovered that particularly in the luxury industry, a lot of these European brands, handbags, sort of really high end, are made out of goat leather, but it's not described in much detail when someone's buying that handbag, other than it just being leather. So it just sort of interested me to start peeling it back and looking, and in this was sort of nearly 10 years ago now, the word sustainability was starting to become really popular, and people were, I just connected a few things together and thought that there's something I could do here, and yeah, if I could sort out the really complicated part, which was the supply chain, then I could build something from it. And I think that's what gave me the confidence to start doing it. But yeah, I mean, goat leather is, and to a certain extent deer leather's in a similar camp, is not only the hides are smaller, but the leather tends to be softer, and it's obviously thinner, so it has slightly different uses than the traditional kind of heavy cowhide that is normally tanned in the UK, or traditionally tanned in the UK.
So potentially stupid question here. Is deer and goat leather more supple because it is thinner, or are the two not necessarily linked?
I think you probably asked 10 people, you get a different answer from 10 people on that. But the thickness of it has something to do with how soft it's going to be. But actually, it does actually come down to fiber structure of the actual skin itself. And without getting too technical, it's kind of the protein structures of skins that even between different deer species, you'll see slightly different structure that maybe makes the leather have a slightly different texture. But a large part of the texture and the feel and the sort of softness of leather comes down to how you actually tan it. And there are many different stages of the process in which you could change things to get a slightly different result. So yeah, it's a little bit like brewing beer or something. You could do anything from Guinness to a lager or whatever, depending on generally sort of similar raw ingredients, but depending on the process, you get something very, very different. And it's similar with leather.
And
that sort of I think that really is an interesting the process of actually making leather is something that is probably not that well understood by our listeners. I know Tom's had a go at making some leather out of his deer skins. I've always personally been put off by pictures I've seen on deer stalking forums of people with buckets full of horrendous looking concoctions. It'd be really interesting to hear how you go about it and how you kind of develop your process. And actually, if you have any tips, if people are thinking about doing it themselves, or actually if you think that is a bit of a fool's errand and you're better off sending it off to somebody professionally to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different parts to it. I mean, it depends what people are trying to do, really. I mean, and the sort of the volumes that you're talking about, because it can be something that done correctly is quite a fun kind of project that you could do with a skin or two at home. You just have to be quite careful with how you're doing it, because essentially what you're trying to do with tanning is stop the skin from going off, and it's a sort of preservation process that done correctly means that it's leather that won't go off and start smelling and all this kind of stuff. But obviously you're starting with a raw skin that is doing its best to just spoil and go off and rot. So the main thing, if you are going to try and preserve it and tan it, the first thing you've got to do is salt it as soon as possible. And there are alternatives, and we're always looking into this, because salt is a nightmare to get rid of once you've got it on the skin. But the salt just starts to cure the skin, get some of the liquid out, and sort of stop it from going off straight away. And that kind of has to happen within hours of it, if not sooner than it coming off the animal. So that's one of the first things to make sure, because once bacteria starts getting into the skin and starting to rot it, it's very, very hard to get out. And we still have problems with this now, even at our level. If a skin hasn't been salted properly, you might find out when it's a lot further down the process that it's damaged, and that can be a problem. So that's the first thing. I mean, there are, you know, various stages of the tanning process, and actually tanning is the last stage, and actually one of the easier stages and one of the cleaner stages, depending on how you do it. The bit that causes the problems for anyone doing it, and just the challenge is what's traditionally known as the beam house stages, which is all of the pre-tanning, and that's when you're using things like lime, and it's where traditionally all of the really bad smelling stuff that gives tanning a bad name comes from. And it's like using, traditionally they would use, like, you know, human pee and pigeon poo or dog poo, or like all of those things that, like, traditionally would have made tanneries absolutely stink. These are sort of stages that stuff happens in, and thankfully we don't have to use these kinds of things anymore. I can buy I can buy chemicals that are much cleaner than having to collect dog poo or something to do it. But that's, in sort of trying to simplify it in terms, is that the tanning stages are about trying to remove anything from the skin that might go off. So you're removing fats and proteins and anything you don't want in there, and that's can be quite a chemical process depending on how you do it, but is fairly easily controlled in a barrel using, you know, we're talking about like lime that you would get in a builder's merchants. Like, it's all about just controlling pHs and stuff, and you can find good guides on how to do this. There are some good books out there. There's a guy called Matt out in the US, whose Instagram handles Traditional Tanners, who runs he runs like Zoom classes if people want to learn how to do this kind of stuff. He has, I think he calls it kitchen table tanning or something, and literally he will post you out everything you need to learn how to do it, and see lots of people doing that successfully. It just the sort of knowledge wasn't really available when I started doing it, and B, I just didn't really want to get into doing it in a barrel in the garden. I thought if I was going to do this, I was going to do it properly.
Bringing back all sorts of horrible memories from when I did try and do this. I had to go around to my local shop and buy copious amounts of salt, because I started with a fallow hide, and I can't even, I think I'd shot this fallow and it had the most beautiful coat on it, and it was at that moment I decided I was going to tan that hide. Had done zero prep or reading or research or anything, and the first thing I read was exactly what you said, which was salt it as quickly as possible. So I remember going into the corner shop and literally buying those like little household things of table salt, and I had to buy, like, I can't even remember how many, but like 20 to 30 to even just like vaguely cover the skin. And I remember the next morning, all of that salt had basically absorbed all the moisture, and it looked as though it needed like the same volume again, if not more. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. So how did you then go from goat leather to deer leather?
Yeah, so once I'd sort of set up, and then the business was kind of, you know, this was over quite a long period of time as a bit of a side project. Despite having jumped into building the tannery, we kind of had to work out how I was going to make a proper business out of it. And at the scale we were at, that quickly I decided that actually it was going to be having the process all the way through to final leather goods was going to be the best way of making a business out of it. So as you can imagine, we'd learned how to make the leather. You get all this stage, and then we had to learn how to, you know, find people to design products and have it made, and it was a long period, and that you know, we were just doing goat skins for quite a long time. But you know, once we sort of set up in a website and we were sort of, people could find us, it was almost a daily occurrence of an email coming through of could you tan this, or could you do that for me, and could you, you know, eventually had to have this sort of huge FAQs on near the contact form on the website, just being like, no, we don't do this, no, we don't do that, no, we can't tan your alpaca skin or whatever you've got, or something like it. Very strange things coming through. But yeah, I was seeing a lot more was about the deer, and just you know, kept reading about the you know, the size of the deer population, and you know, all these kind of factors that were at play that were sort of slightly different to the goatskin situation. Was mainly just because, you know, it was incredibly niche, and there actually aren't that many goats in the UK, combined with the fact that there are barely any tanneries. That was just, you know, something that I thought might be fun to solve. But deer is a slightly different situation in that traditionally there hasn't been a huge amount of deerskin tannering for a long time. I mean, maybe a long time ago, but in sort of modern history, not a huge amount. But the problem, it's a slightly different situation where there were just hundreds of thousands of deerskins from whatever source that might be across, deer stalking, or parkland deer being culled, or deer farming, or all this kind of stuff. So there was this sort of volume I could see that was something that was worth having a look at. So yeah, I think it was eventually it took a sort of a project where I was like, okay, well, we'll do a batch of deerskins. So I can't remember who it was. There was an estate got in touch, and I thought, okay, well, this situation, we could get a hold of 50 or so deerskins and do a test batch to see whether our process that we've developed for goat skins would even vaguely be acceptable for tanning deerskins. And I can't remember exactly which year that was, but it was sort of 50 or so fallow deerskins, and they came out really, really nicely. So I was like, right, okay, well, this isn't going to be a massive difference to what we're doing already, so we could definitely do something here. That sort of started quite a lot of R&D, like trying to source different species of deer, trying to seeing what the difference between wild and maybe farm deerskins might be. And there are lots of differences between all these different things. We can kind of get into it a bit more detail, but the sort of the thing that really kickstarted it was a sort of a lucky introduction to one of the team at Windsor Great Park, who had heard that we were tanning goat skins and might be able to do deer skins as well. And there was a lot of interest at Windsor to do something with skins from the red deer there on the park in the Great Park. So clearly I was like, yeah, absolutely, I will move heaven and earth to do something like this with this sort of project. So that really kickstarted into looking at it properly as to how we might do a lot more with deer skins.
It sort of comes back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of sustainability. In my mind, it seems like the number of deer that are culled across the UK, especially red deer and the bigger species, it seems like this lovely product. All these skins, they do just go for animal waste, and I dare say the vast majority end up in rotting down and going into landfill or something similar. Do you think there is a future where there might be a market even for deer skins, and are you buying them in, or do people donate them? How does that sort of work from a business perspective?
Yeah, so that's sort of partly what we've been working on is how best to solve the problem in the sort of, there's both the short term and the long term view on it. There's clearly a big opportunity, but in the short term, we have to try and make it as simple as possible to kind of get hold of the skins in the best condition as possible. So I mentioned that they get sort of salted pretty quickly, but that is quite hard for sort of smaller operations to do on a sort of consistent level. So what we've more recently I've started doing is working with some of the slightly larger game dealers where their operation is set up for this already. Like, there is a market for deer skins already. There are a few tanneries around the world that will come and source quite large quantities of deer skins that are coming off these big game dealers, and they will take a shipping container full of salted skins once or twice a year or something. But there's a lot of air miles involved in that, and God knows where they actually go. I still don't really even know. But the other thing that's happening more recently with some of these big operators is the deer skins get frozen into massive ice cubes. Like I literally saw a cube of frozen deer skins the other day that were going off in bulk to China to be rendered down into collagen. So that's like, which seems absolutely crazy. Like, with some poor quality skins that wouldn't be useful for leather, I could see where that's quite a useful kind of recycling of a material, and I'm all for it, as if it's the alternative is just rotting in a field. But I can just see this opportunity where if we can work it out, there is definitely a market to turn it into something a bit more valuable than just sort of melting it down into collagen for something God knows what that actually is. But I mean, it's the challenge that we're getting to now is that clearly there are lots of people interested in this, and it's sort of like, oh, can you take the deer skins from us? And the reality, even with my tiny tannery, and it really is tiny compared to what a sort of industrial tannery looks like, we can't just take the raw material in drips and drabs in sort of 1s and 2s, and even sort of 10s is a real problem because, as I mentioned, they start going off pretty quickly, even when they've been salted properly. So for me, it's just trying to find places that have got the right number at the sort of right quantity that we can take at the moment, and hopefully start to kind of scale that up. But yeah, I mean, over the years, we have had a few things where I've been like, I found a source and thought, great, they've got loads of them. They turn on the taps and start salting skins, and then it's just too many for me to deal with. So I sort of have to sort of say, I'm really sorry. Some of these are going to have to go to waste anyway, and it's a big shame, but it's just it's just trying to get the right volume at the right time, and clearly there's an element of seasonality with deer as well, where I'm trying to keep a supply for the whole year, but clearly there are times when I can't get that, or there's times like now when the taps are fully on, and I'm trying to make sure I've got the right amount at the right time. But yeah, it's complicated to sort it out.
When you made a sort of comment earlier about different species of deer, it got me wondering, is there a particular species or even sex or even time of year where actually you get a better quality leather than others? As in, does it make a difference, like a summer male fallow is a much better quality leather or much worse quality leather than, let's say, a female roe deer in winter, for example?
There definitely are differences. And the sort of the idea of quality, I suppose, just depends on what you're trying to do with them. As we don't do any with the hair on, so that's that is a different sort of process with tanning. It's something that we don't specialize in. It's something I've done a few times, and you end up with just big bald patches, and it's a nightmare, to be honest, particularly with deer that the hair is quite loosely attached anyway. So we're mainly interested in making sure that, because it's not necessarily even about consistency, and that the wider leather industry are obsessed with things being consistent and not having scars or marks or anything on it. Whereas, and that's historically why deer skins have been kind of avoided, is that they've might got scars all up the back, they've got all kinds of marks and sort of natural variation on the skins, which in the traditional or in the industrial leather industry is a no-no. So what we've been, I mentioned we saw some farm deer skins at one point, which I'm going to do less, if not none of, in the future, even though those skins are what would be considered much more sort of perfect, because the animals are sort of living in a field rather than crashing through woodland and stuff. But what I'm much more interested in is stuff like the fallow and the red, that are kind of the wild populations that are sort of needing to be controlled a lot more. And they clearly red deer and fallow deer are very different in size, and that's one of the main considerations. But we're finding that there are differences in the leather as it comes out. The smallest fallow deer skins tend to be a bit firmer, and the sort of the larger red deer tend to be what's called in leather terms looser, so they're a bit sort of baggier. And I haven't quite worked this out to this detail with the deer skins as much as I have with the goat skins, but there will be a difference between the males and the females, definitely. Just for sort of one of the complications with the goat skins in the UK is that most of the herd are dairy animals that are female, and they've had lots of kids, and clearly as they get pregnant, the stomachs they expand and contract, and it ends up in quite baggy leather in those areas, to put it in sort of simple terms, and that's not really what you're looking for. And I suspect there's probably something a bit like that going on with the deer, but maybe less to less extent. And there's all kinds of things that we're finding at different times of the year, and some of it comes down to like fat content. And I think just talking to game dealers and anyone that's skinning deer, I think different times of the year, different animals skin more easily than others, and the neater they skin, the better it is for us, because the salt actually goes into the skin properly if there's loads of meat left on the skin, then the salt doesn't get in properly, and that's really when you start getting problems with bacteria and everything. So yeah, it's quite complicated, and I'm only just starting to piece together what is best for us at what moment, depending on what we're going to do with the leather.
So I should point out before you get absolutely inundated with requests after this podcast that you're, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, Jack, but you're not sort of open for business for any old sort of stalker just to get in contact and say, I've got a couple of deer hides, can I send them to you?
Yeah, sadly not. It's just not feasible for us to manage that type of thing, as I mentioned. And there is something there for the future that I think can be pieced together in local areas, or it just needs some sort of system in place so that there's a centralization of collection and salting and storing. I mean, just not quite there yet with the deer yet, but it's something I would like to do, and I'm always interested to talk to people if they've got ideas as to how that could work. But yes, at the moment I don't sort of take donations, as it were. I have to go sort of quite specifically to sources of the skins at the moment.
And when you're sourcing your wild deer skins, it's maybe a silly question, but we talk a lot about on this podcast shot placement, and there's a big debate about whether you should chest shoot or head shoot deer. I'm sure you've heard about. Do you have a spec on what you can take? Does it matter if something's chest shot, obviously it having holes in it, or can you cut around that, or how does that sort of work?
Yeah, I mean, it's simpler if they are headshot, clearly, but yeah, it's one of those things that most of what we've sourced so far has been headshot. It's not going to be a complete no, I don't think, but just because of the way that my business operates at the moment, we're making the end product, so we can cut around something, and I'm not going to get in trouble with anyone because I haven't sold the leather to someone to use, if you know what I mean. But I suppose the one of the questions is around kind of what it might do to the skin around where that wound is, and whether that's going to cause damage that's not just the bullet hole, if you know what I mean. But I haven't done enough testing around it, to be honest, to know what that might be.
And we'll probably get onto the products in a second, but have you ever considered the sort of full circular economy in terms of making sort of deer stalking related products from leather? To me, that kind of feels like the full picture. I mean, to be fair, there might not be enough demand out there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always something I think about. I think the challenge with it is, and this is always the challenge with what has always been the challenge with the business, is that by the time we've gone through all of our process, and these products are made in the UK up to a really high standard, the price point creeps up quite a lot, and it's not. I'm not slapping on luxury margins like a sort of Louis Vuitton type operation, but the realities are that the price point is quite high. So it's trying to work out, is there a sort of premium end of the stalking market where people really will want to spend a lot of money on a particular type of items? Then yes, that could definitely work. I think it's something that I've thought about a lot, and it's just working out what sort of products people might be willing to spend that bit more on to have kind of made in the UK with British deer leather.
Me, something like a leather rifle sling made out of fallow deer leather would be absolutely amazing. But maybe that's a plea to you as the listeners. If you're listening to this and you think that'd be a great idea, drop us a message or a comment. So don't bombard Jack with that kind of stuff. He's been kind enough with his time, let alone to put up with messages about that. But
I certainly think it has legs. I mean, the stalking community, I think, are one that really care about stuff like that. Sustainability is really high on everyone's agenda, and people who listen to this podcast love their kit. And Tom being a prime example, are happy to spend good money on good products. You've got a nice leather rifle sling, Tom, haven't you, with bullet holders and things? And yeah, deer leather, one of those would be incredible.
Yeah, you've got your first customer here already, Jack. I promise you now. But the other products that you have, and for anyone who's sort of unaware or unfamiliar with Billy Tannery, go and have a look at the website, which is billytannery.co.uk. But there's the most amazing array of products on there. How did you decide what to make out of the leather? Because I presume once you've got that sort of sheet of leather, you then sat there sort of going, oh God, what do we turn this into?
That's it. And it was more of an exercise of restraint than anything, because I think once you've got this leather, it's amazing. You're kind of like, what we can do so many different things. And it was a challenge in the sort of early days. We started with a very small range. We launched the business on Kickstarter back in sort of 2017, and with some designs of products that we largely still have today, which is like the roll top backpack, which is kind of our signature backpack, and then a tote bag, and we kept the range quite small, and sort of we're trying to go after sort of a like quite a sort of elevated market, but somewhere in between, where it's not like crazy expensive, thousands of pounds for a bag, but somewhere that's still kind of in the premium end, so that we can make it work. And it's sort of gradually grown from there. I think it's sort of a little bit like my own life, where I grew up on the farm, lived in London for most of my kind of adult life. I was kind of always looking for that connection between the two, and actually that's kind of where we've tried to be as a business with the products that we make. It's kind of trying to bring a bit of the countryside to people who might live in the city through the leather and the sort of the stories and the kind of the imagery and everything. But that's always a kind of a work in progress. We've done over the years. We like to do lots of collaborations with other companies. We've done sort of collaborations with Northampton shoemakers, or with we did one with Laird hatters, who did some sort of flat caps with some kind of leather detailing, and there's quite a few in the pipeline at the moment, including another one with a Northampton shoemaker called Cheney, some deer leather boots that are they've been on pre-order and are releasing in sort of October time this year. So depending on when this comes out, people might be able to see them and get them in time.
I feel like there's a Deercast collaboration here, Harry. A Deercast leather rifle sling. I'm just putting it out there. Jack is filled with horror at the idea of working with us two idiots. He's literally said it like, "Oh my God."
No, I'm up for it. I think there's definitely more we can do there. I think what's always been the thing for me is making sure that I've always been keen that we have sort of carve out our niche, and I could see lots of brands catering to the countryside market. It's a traditional countryside market, and that's why I just didn't start there. But there are lots of rational reasons why that would be a really good market for us. It's just doing it in the right way, and maybe in a way that's a bit more modern than sort of the classic kind of country sports brands.
And you've got a collaboration on your website with Nep. Do you want to just talk a bit about how that came about, and the sort of products that you've got with them?
Yes, so that's been a really exciting one that was in the works for quite a long time. And if anyone doesn't know about Nep, it's the rewilding estate down in Sussex, and part of the rewilding project there are the fallow deer within the system, and those deer are culled on an annual basis, like they would be in many parklands, and they have a butchery on site, and they sell the meat through the shop, and they also have a kind of a sort of a wider shop offering there for people who come to visit wildlands and sort of walk around and everything. And I was introduced to the team there, and it's just it's a natural fit. We can take the deer skins from their location, from the butchery that it is set up to sort of handle salting and storing for us. And so what happens is we take the deer skins on what I think will be an annual basis, and then we turn it into a range, sort of special edition versions of some of our existing range that are on offer in the Nep shop and also on our website as well. So it's just a really good story that sort of connects. Again, it gives people an opportunity to connect with the rewilding project at Nep through the leather, hopefully, and we really have pushed the kind of the scars and the marks and stuff on what we show on the products in that range. So you'll, compared to some of the other products on the website, we've really made sure to show quite how scarred and marked, and I think even more beautiful the products are for it.
Definitely. it gives a bit more context as to the animal that it came from. I think that's really cool.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it is always a tension though, because it's, it's not the usual thing with leather. It's been traditionally, leather is something that's kind of, it's been sprayed a certain color, it's been embossed, it's been corrected, and that's what is perfection in the eyes of some people. But we're sort of trying to turn that on its head a little bit and show that actually the natural marks and scars is actually what proves of, provenance and where it's come from, and hope that people can get on board with that.
I 100% agree. To me, it's a bit like wood in that it's a natural product, and you need to embrace the natural beauty of that product. That to me is what sort of creates the joy of looking at it. I think that fascinating. So what's next for Billy Tannery? Where are you?
Yeah. So the plan that's been in the pipeline for a very long time, and I still struggle to say that whether we've made any progress on it, is that we have been trying for a while to find a new home for the tannery, a new larger site. So it's still at the moment is on my family farm in a very small building. It's less than 1,000 square foot, and we really are struggling to keep up with what we need to be doing, particularly with the potential with the deer leather side. So for the last sort of couple of years, I've been meeting pretty much every single big farming estate in the kind of Northamptonshire area where I now live, and clearly Northampton's got an amazing leather heritage. And yeah, the plan is to find either an existing sort of empty site on a farm and build a larger version of what we've got at the moment, or potentially even try and put up a new building somewhere that depending on the site. So yeah, I think we're close, but I don't want to jinx it and sort of talk too much more about where it might be. But that's the sort of the big next step for us, and I'm hoping that we'll have some proper movement on that in sort of the next year, because yeah, that's the sort of the way that we can really start doing a lot more with the business, and quite exciting. I mean, I've been picking up bits of equipment and kit that are in storage all over the place because, sadly the trend with tanneries continues, and that there are more, there aren't that many left now, but even since I started, a handful have closed down in the UK and in other places, that allows me to go in and pick up kit quite cheaply. So it's sort of, my supply of kit for a larger setup is growing, and we're kind of keen to crack on and do that. But that's kind of the main thing that's quite exciting, and sort of alongside it, and partly sort of largely driven by our work in the sort of deer leather space, is looking to improve the traceability of each one of the hides through the system. And this is another thing that I'm keen to talk to you guys about, is it's the practicalities really, is that it's similarly with a goat skin in the traditional sort of farming and abattoir system. They have an ear tag, but then as soon as the skin is removed, the traceability is pretty much gone, and there's no link there. And I think similarly with a deer, they have the sort of the tag that they have to have for when they're shot, but that information doesn't carry on to the skin once it's taken off. So we're trying to work out what a practical solution is to try and keep that information in with the skin as it goes through the process, so that we can then trace that through and hopefully give like a really interesting story with each product that you get. You might even be able to say, okay, that particular deer skin came from this county, or maybe even more detail than that.
This is probably an idea you're going to completely cringe at or tell me is stupid, but when you skin a deer, I mean, you've still got the kind of, and apologies to anyone listening if this is too much information, you've still got the sort of the lower bit of, or the upper bit of the leg that's left, which I presume is not much use actually from a leather point of view, because I presume if you're thinking about the kind of leather skin as like a rectangle, on each corner you've then got a little bit that kind of dangles off, which is the bit of the leg. Would there be a way of like attaching a tag to like a I'm trying to think of the word, like almost like an ear tag on an animal, like placing a new ear tag in that little sort of bit of leg that's hanging off, whether that's plastic or metal, and you could emboss the same number on it that was on the sort of physical and sort of carcass tag, and then that way the sort of traceability continues through the process, or actually as soon as that skin has been taken off, are you trimming off bits like that so that you're not tanning them?
Yeah, I mean, we thought about that definitely, and it is a simple way of doing it at that point. So you could maybe at that exact moment get a tag on, and that information carries on to us. The part of the problem is, yes, they do get trimmed, but also one of the machines that we run them through wouldn't allow the tag that's attached to the skin to still be on there, so it just get torn off. So there are solutions in the sort of top industrial volume level of the industry where they laser mark every hide, that's a really good development in the leather industry, where there's a lot more of that going on. But at a small scale, that sort of laser technology is not, I don't think is going to be practical, sadly. So we're working on that, but I can see a really exciting way in which some more information on sort of provenance of where the leathers come from could be shown, even on like a little scannable tag or something on the product themselves.
That'd be really cool.
It really would. It'd be cool to be able to buy some deer leather product and know exactly which animal and which estate it's come from. I think that would be a really nice part of the story. And when you're buying premium products these days, as we all know, you're buying into that narrative, aren't you? You want to know, the provenance is becoming so important to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I was wondering about your plans for expansion. What is your sort of ultimate goal with that? Is it to be able to do more deer leather, or do a wider range of products, or where do you sort of what does that unlock for you as a business?
So, I mean, it's a bit of everything, really. I mean, we are just constrained at the moment by the volumes in which we can put through the tannery, and we've got loads of really exciting projects, both on the sort of side of the business that I've mentioned already, which is our consumer side, which is the bags and wallets and everything that you'll see on the website. But we also have another side of the business, which is more kind of like a trade side, and that side of the business has grown a lot recently. We do lots of work with hotels and restaurants and other sort of hospitality businesses, which isn't something I'd thought we would get into when I first started the business, but actually there's a lot of leather used in restaurants. You go in and open the menu in a restaurant, for example, might be in a leather bound book, placemats, coasters, all that kind of stuff. And we're having like really good success going into slightly higher end of the market, where they are interested in something that's been made really well here in the UK, again with that story. And particularly this, I suppose it probably makes sense, but we've had loads of exciting projects in the last couple of years up in Scotland, particularly with deer leather. So there's the Royal project I mentioned is also going on with Balmoral as well as Windsor. That's been sort of a great part of that project. But also we've got some deer leather products in the new Ardbeg distillery, which has just opened a hotel up on Isla, and they came to us specifically to do something interesting. We sourced some deerskins from Isla and made them some menu covers and various other bits and pieces that are in that distillery hotel up in Scotland. And for them, it was the whole thing was about it being an interesting local story that they could tell that sort of goes alongside the story of the whiskey. So there's all these exciting opportunities that are sort of presenting themselves and in different ways, and in order to sort of really make the most of that, we're desperate to kind of be able to produce more leather.
Very cool. A slight kind of wind back a little bit, and it's kind of your good fortune, but other people's not so good fortune, that you're picking up equipment from other tanneries that are closing. Why is it that other tanneries are closing? As in, from like an outsider's perspective, it doesn't feel as though there's a lack of demand in the market, or is it sort of cost of running these facilities, or sort of environmental compliance, or a mixture of all of them?
It's kind of a mixture of all of it, and I think it's a similar story with most manufacturing in countries like the UK over the past 50 years, is that a sort of most of sort of the type of manufacturing that benefits from cheap labor and not much environmental control has moved to parts of the world where perhaps those things aren't such a problem. So it's sort of, there's that where you had tanneries and sort of other sort of similar businesses in the UK just couldn't compete at the price that a tannery in China or India might be able to compete at. And part of the problem is they just didn't really know how to or change fast enough to compete on something other than price. And I think that's where the ones that have managed to stay operating are able to sell at a sort of premium end because it's made in the UK and done in the sort of way that's been done for hundreds of years. And there's all this sort of stuff that goes behind it that commands a higher price. And I think that's kind of what's happened to a lot of the leather industry. I mean, the other side of it is consolidation and, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that doesn't help small businesses operating kind of in places like the UK either. So yeah, places like Italy and to some extent Spain and France have got slightly larger leather industries left because maybe they've consolidated into these big luxury groups and it's just the way that some these manufacturing businesses have gone.
And this is a weird question for you, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I've wrote it down on my pad of paper and it's been bugging me ever since. What's the weirdest thing anyone has ever got in touch with you and asked if you'd either tan or turn into leather?
Well, I mentioned alpacas before, but the weirdest one, which also is probably the funniest one, was a guy that got in touch, and I think he was a pest control guy who got in touch and asked us if we wanted any moleskins because he thought that that's what moleskin fabric was made out of, actual moles, and would we want them. So I just had to explain that moleskin wasn't actually made out of moles, and we left it there.
You didn't get a bag of moles in the post?
No, I didn't, luckily.
That's amazing.
It's absolutely
yeah, I could ask you so many questions all night. Sorry, Harry, go on. Sounds like you've got one.
Well, just to wind back a bit, I was having a look at your website. I noticed that obviously most of the leather products that you buy off the well, anywhere almost, and off your website, they're all the sort of distinctive browns or blacks and things like that. How does the actual, because we haven't really spoken about the tanning aspects of a tannery. I presume when you finish with a skin, it's not that brown color. How does that whole process work?
Yeah, so that's like a whole nother side to the supply chain, is that so we in our tannery we get up to a stage where the leather is tanned, and at that point it is a sort of a light browny color, which comes from the tannins that we use, which are bark extracts, which is like a sort of tea-like powder that goes into the sort of water that they're in, and that is the actual tanning stage, and you get left with undyed leather. Which you could use for something, but it's kind of quite brittle and quite solid. What the next stage of the process that we then have suppliers that do, and we've got a few of them around the UK. They specialize in dyeing and finishing of leather. So we don't actually do any of that, the dyeing part. And actually, that's one of the things that I think is a detail that most people, they don't really need to know. But the tanning is one part of it, and actually then the color and the other finishes like sort of coatings and everything is a separate stage that is done elsewhere.
There's some amazing colours on the website. I think there's a menu that's a sort of I don't know how you describe it, a sort of like a greeny sort of aqua colour, which is really cool. And then, as Harry says, you've got the kind of normal brown colours you're used to seeing, some blues on there. It does just show to me the sort of really unique ability of leather, that you can make it so many different things, both in terms of appearance but feel as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can do, again, it's sort of like a exercise in restraint, largely. Like that, you can do pretty much anything you want. You could, if you really wanted to, and that's how you wanted it to look, you can do like silver foiled leather. But I mean, the more you'd add to it, I think personally, you're sort of taking away from the natural nature of it. So we kind of try and don't do too much to it. A lot of the suppliers, when we first went to them, the dyers wanted to do lots and lots of stuff to it, add loads of things, and we sort of pared it right back to sort of the what we definitely needed to make it perform well, but without going too crazy on things like colors and stuff. But yeah, the products that you can that are on the Balmoral Castle website, we do a specific kind of burgundy red for them, which is probably the brightest we get with the deerskins at the moment.
Wow, Jack, as I said earlier, I could sit here and ask you questions about leather all day, which is either a bit of a busman's holiday for you, or maybe you enjoy it. But I'm conscious you've given us a huge amount of your time, and we've picked your brains sort of quite late into the night about this. So a massive thank you to you for coming on. A plug, as I said earlier, to anyone that is thinking of picking up some stunning looking leather, then head on over to the Billy Tannery website, which is billytannery.co.uk. All that remains then for me is just to say a massive thank you to you for joining us, Jack.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me. I love talking about all this kind of stuff, and I've been on a journey learning all about this stuff for the last 10 years, and I'm glad when other people are interested in it as well.
Amazing. And we will definitely pick up with you about some custom Deercast merch made out of deer leather.
Let's do it.
There you go. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.